Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to dive into this with you today because we are unpacking some truly fascinating cognitive science. We're going to look at exactly why we forget things, and much more importantly, how we can study and learn with just incredible efficiency. Seriously, by the end of this, we're going to completely transform the way you absorb information. So here is our game plan for today. We'll start with the passive learning trap, and then move into the science of forgetting. After that, we'll cover the cognitive ladder, dive into some practical workflows, and wrap up with choosing active retrieval. All right, let's jump right into part one, the passive learning trap, and what's known as the illusion of competence. Okay, we have all been in this deeply relatable and frankly super frustrating scenario, right? Just picture this. You're sitting at your desk. You've literally spent hours reading a dense chapter under a warm desk lamp. You're smoothly running a neon yellow highlighter over all those key sentences, writing out these neat, beautiful summary notes. You close the book feeling incredibly confident, totally believing you've mastered the material. But then, the next morning, you sit down to actually apply that knowledge or take a test, and your mind just goes completely blank. You suddenly realize you can't actually reconstruct a single concept from scratch. Well, what's happening there is a stark difference between merely recognizing something and actually recalling it. Your brain is essentially playing a trick on you. It mistakes the ease of recognizing words on a page for actual mastery of the data. You know, reading something 3 times doesn't magically store it in your brain. It really just makes it look familiar. So if we want to learn hard things faster, we have to stop trying to force information in and start practicing pulling it out. Which brings us perfectly to part 2, the science of forgetting, and why exactly your brain deletes data. To really grasp why we forget, we've got to look at the biology. Back in the late 19th century, a psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus discovered this steep drop-off known as the forgetting curve. And it turns out the human brain is just a strict efficiency machine. If you read a fact passively, your brain assumes it's just background noise and ruthlessly prunes it away. It will drop your retention to a dismal 20% in just 24 hours. But here is where it gets interesting. Watch what happens when we introduce friction into the process. Every single time you force your brain to retrieve a memory, which is a process called spaced retrieval, the curve totally flattens out. By repeatedly pulling the information out of your brain, your retention actually stays near 100%. You are actively stopping the decay. So think of your mind kind of like a really thick, dense jungle. Passive reading is simply looking at a destination on a map. It's easy, but it doesn't actually get you there. Active retrieval, on the other hand, is like physically hacking a permanent path through the brush with a machete. The harder your brain works to clear that path, the deeper and more permanent that neural connection actually becomes. Let's move in to part 3, the cognitive ladder, and how we go about building this framework. The absolute golden rule of learning is this. If it feels easy, you probably aren't actually learning. Most people fail at active recall just because they stop at basic comprehension. To master truly complex subjects, you've got to climb these 3 steps of the cognitive ladder. You have to move from basic memorization all the way up to higher-order critical thinking. So, step 1 is our foundational level, remember and understand. This is where you're using simple retrieval tools, maybe something like digital flashcards, to lock in the raw facts, the formulas, and the vocabulary definitions. Now, this step is absolutely essential, for sure, but it is only the beginning of the journey. To climb higher to step 2, apply and analyze, you really have to stop asking what is this definition and start asking how does this compare? You have to actively connect ideas. For example, say you're studying geography. You wouldn't just memorize agricultural data. Instead, you'd actively contrast intensive farming with extensive farming to figure out exactly why their outputs differ. You're mapping the structural differences. And finally, the highest step, step 3, is evaluate and create. This is the stage where you actually become the examiner. You literally design your own complex, short-form questions targeting the absolute hardest concepts to explain. By doing this, you are ensuring your knowledge isn't just some memorized list of words, but a concept you truly own, can manipulate, and deeply understand. All right, moving on to part 4, practical workflows and our 3 desk-level strategies. It is time to translate all this fascinating cognitive science into highly practical workflows that you can apply directly at your desk today. The first workflow is called the closed book method. Now, this is an incredibly simple, yet totally brutal exercise in memory reconstruction. It relies on a blank piece of paper to expose exactly what you do and, more importantly, what you do not know. Here is exactly how you execute it. First, you read a difficult section of your text for about 15 minutes. Second, you close the book completely, hide the source, and dump every single concept, connection, and diagram you can possibly remember onto a blank page from scratch. Finally, you open the book back up and grab a different colored pen, like a green pen for instance, to fix your errors and fill in the gaps. Let me tell you, it forces immense brain friction. The second workflow we have is the inquiry method. This strategy is just brilliant because it's designed to prime your brain and set your focus before you even begin reading a textbook or an article. It completely transforms you from a passive consumer into an active hunter for knowledge. So, here are the steps for this one. Before you read a single word, just scan the major headings of the text. Then, turn every single one of those headings into a highly specific question. Now, when you finally start actually reading, your brain is actively hunting for the answers to those specific questions, rather than just letting all the words passively wash over you. Our third and final desk-level workflow is the self-assessment log. This is meant to completely replace that old, incredibly ineffective habit of taking standard, passive summary notes while you study. To do this, just build a simple 2-column spreadsheet. You put your challenging questions on one side and the precise, structured answers on the other. When it's time to review, you simply hide that answer column and test your recall systematically. You only reveal the answers after you've forced your brain to try and retrieve them. Now, the crucial takeaway here is the ratio. Incorporating just 50 minutes of active retrieval using one of these 3 habits is going to yield significantly more retention than 3 whole hours of passive rereading. It is literally all about working smarter, not just longer. And that leads us to our final section, Part 5, Choosing Active Recall, and our conclusion. When we really reflect on all this science, it boils down to this. Protecting your attention means you don't have to exhaust your mind with endless, mindless repetition. True productivity is about being highly intentional with your cognitive energy. It's about actively choosing that deep, friction-filled path of retrieval over the incredibly easy but totally fake illusion of passive reading. So, I want to leave you with one final thought today. Will you continue relying on that easy illusion of recognition, or are you ready to hack your own deep, permanent path through the jungle of active recall? I really challenge you to radically rethink your very next study session. Your mind thrives when you challenge it to pull knowledge from within. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I can't wait to see you apply these powerful frameworks.